Much. My name is Jeff Alter. I'm a product marketing director for Neustar, a company that helps you know your customers, orchestrate their journey, and optimize your investments. Stephanie, can you please introduce yourself?
I'm Vice President of Brand Management for globally for Holiday Inn Express as part of the IHG family.
Great. Stephanie, I'm so excited to be with you today discussing the future of travel. So let's get right into it.
Yep.
You've had a very interesting career path. Can you please talk a little bit about your background and how you ended up in this exciting role?
Sure. So, 15 years ago, if you asked me if I was to be in this role, I probably would not have guessed so. I started my career as an accountant. I worked on the advisory side of accounting for Ernst& Young, and really loved it. I very much like a numbers geek, and ultimately got my CPA. But one thing I learned in the advisory side of accounting is I also really loved just connecting with executives and solving problems. And so when I went back to actually went back to business school, and really got a chance to, and those who had experience with the case method, and had the opportunity to potentially even visit Harvard Business School, you really get this opportunity to test out new ideas on a daily basis. And I really fell in love with this concept of merging operations and organizational topics, and knew I wanted to go be an advisor to senior executives as they solve those problems. So post business school, went back into consulting, but more on the strategy and org side. And through all that work, interestingly enough, through all my travels around the US, and did a stint in India, starting two tech companies there, and then really fell in love with this concept of deeply understanding consumer insights in order to build out better tech products and better brands. Um, I really just fell in love with this industry, the hotel industry. At that time, interestingly enough, Hilton reached out about a role to lead strategy. And it was the perfect time. So I think in every Road Warriors experience, they have a moment where all of a sudden the bed at the hotel, as nice as the bed might be, is not as comfortable as their bed at home. And they're ready to do their strategy work for one company. So I was excited to join Hilton and lead strategy, and then ultimately, new ventures. And last fall, I actually reached out about this role leading Holiday Inn Express globally. And I thought it was a great opportunity to combine my love for customer insights, operations, which is essentially a lot of what we do within brand management, and then taking all those insights and applying it to our marketing messages. And so it's been a really great fit. I see is a really great company, and also just a really great family of people.
That is quite the career journey. And it sounds like you've built up some very valuable experience in your time leading up to IHG. Now,
Absolutely.
Stephanie, as I started preparing for our conversation today, of course, one of the first places I looked was your LinkedIn profile. And something caught my eye immediately. I loved one of the words that showed up in your LinkedIn profile headline, and that word is optimist. Such a critically important thing to be today. How has that optimism helped you through the pandemic?
No, it's interesting. And I went back and forth on whether or not to even include that on my LinkedIn profile, but it's something that's such a core part of who I am that I think it's important for people to know, when they meet me, before they enter into a meeting, that I'm always going to try and find the silver linings, in all things. I think there are silver linings in every event that occurs in our lives, whether or not it's professionally or personally. And once we figure out what the silver lining is and we focus on them, we tend to, I think, to fare better in life. And so I think this definitely has applied, throughout the pandemic. It's also applied throughout our work every day, especially in this industry where we're constantly challenged with new questions around how we serve our guests, how we make sure we're the right brand for our owners. And even though I'm a combination of very data driven, and very much a logical person when it comes to decision making, I like to understand like the whys behind decisions. I also like to combine that with a lot of heart, and I think that's where the optimism comes in. I think it's important to be clear about how well you're performing as a business, but I also think it's equally important to understand the human impact of all decision making. So being an optimist and assuming the best in people and situations helps me ensure that I'm bringing my heart to all decision making.
I,
That's a
I
really good catch.
I love that. And I think sometimes I can be accused of looking at a glass and saying that glass is half empty. So perhaps I
Mhm,
can channel some of your optimism for myself.
mhm.
Stephanie, you also said in a recent interview something that caught my eye. You said organizations value leaders who are solutions oriented. How do you try to be solutions oriented in your role? And how do you inspire your teams to be solutions oriented?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Well, I mentioned earlier that I spent many years as a management consultant, and one thing I learned during those years was to make sure that you deeply understand the problem that you're trying to solve and treat every problem like an opportunity. And in my role, we're often faced with both strategic and operational questions, and sometimes it can feel like the hurdle is a little bit too high. But I'm often surprised that when you're experiencing these hurdles, you can often overcome it by just saying, like, what is possible? Or are we sure it's not possible to do X? And I think oftentimes when your team hears this over and over and over again, they start going through the same process themselves. And this is going to be the cheat code for anybody who ever interviews with me in the future. But one question I always ask people is, tell me your life story and key decisions that you've made along the way. So 2 to 3 key decisions. And what I'm actually looking for are examples where you've actually shown yourself to be solutions oriented, where you've experienced some sort of challenge or hurdle and you've gone past it and thought about in new innovative ways to solve it. And so I think the more that you invest in teaching your team how to be solutions oriented and use that mindset, the better the outcomes are for not just the work that you do, but the experience that your customers have with your product or brand.
I love that. And also, nice spoiler alert there for your future interviewees.
Mhm.
I think it's great advice. And you also make a great point that it's so important to understand the challenge in front of you before you try to tackle it. So I really couldn't agree with that more. And you have a lot of challenges on your plate because you wear a lot of hats. Stephanie, you're responsible for strategy, brand design, brand experience, growth, commercial performance. I think it took me like 3 breaths just to get through all of that. How do you find the right balance between those various initiatives and functions?
Yeah, that's something I love about my job is every day and every hour I'm tackling a different topic. And what's great about the model that we use at IHG is I have great partners across the business in all these areas, as well as members of my team. Um, and I think how do I handle thinking through where I should spend my time? Prioritization. I think prioritization is key to any strategy. So at the very beginning of the week, I'm very clear about my goals and intentions for the week and defining what success looks like. I also do that each morning. And if there's something on my calendar that is not aligned with our goals for the week and it's not a priority for the brand, I move it to the next week. I think it's just really important that every day you're clear on what you're trying to achieve. But you're right. I sometimes I spend an hour thinking about a design decision for the Holiday Inn Express brand and how we can potentially continue to be one of the most competitive design options, or I'm thinking about how do we roll out a new experience, whether or not that's breakfast or it's a service model that we want to try out, or we're thinking about how do we open new hotels in new regions and who's the right sort of strategic partner to do so. It's a fun job because I do get to wear many hats, but the way in which I think you're successful in the role is making sure you're clear on your intentions and having a very detailed prioritization effort to ensure that every day you're meeting the goals at hand.
For sure. It sounds like you've got a lot to juggle, so I'm not surprised to hear that prioritization is part of your secret sauce. In a recent interview, you also said that it's important to look at business models outside of the travel industry to find potential disruptors. What trends or disruptors have you seen outside of travel that are interesting or that you might want to adopt?
Mhm. Um, I love this question, particularly because I think it's something that we you need to ensure you're constantly looking at disruptors, whether or not it's in your industry or outside your industry or just staying close to technology. And you see elements of disruption everywhere you go. So it's a really good question. It's something I ask my team on a regular basis to think about as well. Um, but you know what? Even before the pandemic, we were starting to see a lot of digital transformation and this merging between service, digital, and the physical world. And I remember 2 years ago, I was on a road trip and we stopped in a McDonald's. I can't actually remember the last time I had actually entered into a McDonald's at the time. Um, but stopped in the McDonald's and I walked in, and instead of going up to go speak to somebody to order, there was a kiosk where I could order, and they gave me a number, and then I used that number to then just pick up my food, and that was all well and good. But one thing that was interesting from a service operations perspective, when I got into the McDonald's, they had high top seating, they had outlets everywhere, there were nice chairs, and it didn't actually feel like a McDonald's. It actually felt like McDonald's meets Starbucks meets WeWork. It felt like a place that I actually could have a meeting and that I actually could sit for quite a bit of time. And it was interesting to me because not only do they have a great setup, but the Wi-Fi capability was really great. And what it reminded me is that we have been merging this, work and life question for quite some time. The pandemic just forced us to move it, 20 years ahead of what we thought when we thought it would occur. Um, so I think in the service operations space, we're just seeing this merging of service, of technology, and of the physical world. And guests, as they start experiencing that more and more in restaurants, at other types of events, they're going to expect the same thing within their hotels. And so that we're definitely applying the same sort of thinking as we look at our hotel brands. Another area that I think is really interesting is geolocation strategy and the fact that mobile devices have enabled all of us to better understand our consumer because we can learn more about where people travel, what retail outlets are near them. And I think because of that, we're able to customize our messaging based on these insights. And this is something that's going on, I think, across the industry. Now, naturally, we have to be thoughtful about privacy, which I know, every company is actively thinking
Of
about.
course.
But how cool is it that, brands can better serve me because they understand the sort of brands and activities that I love. Um, so that's really cool. We're also seeing a lot of innovations around payments going on around the world. And, starting here within the US, Disney started off thinking about this when they created the wristband where you can go and you can try any ride and you can pay for anything through your wristband. But Amazon Go, I feel like took this to another level with the grab and go capabilities. And as you know, at our almost 3,000 hotels, we have retail outlets in them, and we're actively thinking about how we can make those more technology enhanced. I think that will take time, but I think one thing that's really exciting about hotel stays is when you go stay at a hotel, oftentimes you do kind of want that seamless integration between your technology and the things that you're looking to achieve. So whether or not it's ordering food, getting your breakfast, getting delivery, going down and picking up your water and your favorite snack. I think that integration of technology you'll start to see more and more within hotels. And then lastly, for those that know me really well, know that I love robots and any internet of things technology, and I think that's both of those areas are going to continue to evolve within the service operations space. We're seeing companies like Domino's that are investing in capabilities that allow delivery without human beings, right? They're allowing folks to get access to their pizza and it's going to be delivered through some robot-like capabilities. I think we might start seeing similar sorts of services within our hotel industry. I think we're going to start seeing ways in which we can make the hotel more connected to technology. So whether or not you're able to change the temperature in the room or change whether or not you want lights on or lights off, or you want your window shades open or not. I think those are some innovations that we're continuing to investigate to make the experience of the hotel feel a lot like it feels when you're at home. At our brand, we've really started adopting and thinking through a lot of innovations, whether or not it's keyless entry at many of our hotels, and to think through how can we make the breakfast experience better through using digital devices. You'll likely see more and more of these amenities in our hotels in the coming years.
That's so interesting. I love that McDonald's is the place where you happen to stumble upon some inspiration. That's so interesting. And I think we're all, so eager to see how the travel industry is able to leverage new types of technology in the future, which is a good segue to the future of travel. We see all these numbers coming in about the continuing rebound for the travel category, yet at the same time, we know that we're still far from returning to normal. Can you talk about some of the early results you've seen from Q1 and talk about what they mean to you and the brand?
Yeah, I just want to say one kudos to everybody that's worked in the travel industry this last year and
Indeed.
a half. It has not been easy, but I also so thankful to all of our customers and our owners that have felt the need to stick with us. And I think especially our customers, the fact that they continue to want to choose IHG Hotel and Resort brands, and we see it in our results. As we know, we're already seeing evidence that when the restrictions are lifted, that customers are definitely ready to travel. And as the rollout of vaccines become more established and travel restrictions ease, we're seeing that the strength of our brands and portfolio is ensuring that guests feel more confident to travel, but it's also well positioning our brands for success. Um, but in certain regions, there's risk, right? There's volatility around when folks are going to get the vaccine. There's some macroeconomic issues that go on in certain regions. And so we have to be thoughtful about that. In the Americas, we're seeing, great performance, very much led by leisure trips. I think many of us went on the spring break trip to some warm destination or some outdoor location that we're just so excited to learn more about our local environments. But we are seeing, especially in our leisure areas in Florida and Texas along the coast, performance is doing really well. Um, and then as we move into summer, if you haven't booked your summer vacation, book it now. I heard the other day, actually, also, if you are planning to get married and you haven't booked your wedding, book it now too, because business is definitely picking up. But we are a global company, so if you think about what's going on in the rest of the world, leisure demand continues to grow in places like China, and we saw the rebound there fastest. And we're also seeing a lot more corporate and group bookings, and I know that's an area that we're all interested in. Um, and then we look at parts of the rest of the world, so Europe, Middle East, Africa, and other parts of Asia. I think this is where it's more of a mixed picture. So very much focused on staying keen on where we have government restrictions across Europe. But there are some encouraging signs around Middle East, and as we see more examples of travel bubbles opening up, I'm sure you've heard about Australia, New Zealand creating a travel bubble. I think that's really encouraging.
For sure. And, it's not surprising to hear that there's such a different rate of recovery in different parts of the globe as that recovery sort of continues. And as you look towards the future of travel, what does returning to normal mean to you?
Yeah, this word normal. We discussed earlier that I'm an optimist, and I sometimes wonder if when people say like, "What does return to normal mean to you?" or "What is a new normal?" Maybe just normal is constantly evolving. Our realities, both professionally and personally, have definitely changed. And I'm sure at some points during the past year and a half, it might have felt like that it changed for the worse. But now I think, despite the unfortunate health challenges in many regions, that there might be some silver linings. So returning to normal has more to do, I think, with a mindset focused on like innovation and appreciation to getting to a life that is meaningful to each individual. Um, Brand wise, returning to normal, it actually means kind of similar things. So, around innovation, we're actually thinking about how do we offer the brand hallmarks that our guests love. So that's our breakfast, that's the sleep experience, that's a clean stay. How do we offer it while keeping in mind the context of the world today? And so, innovating on those services and make sure that guests are getting value out of that experience and really just serving as a launch pad for the sort of experience that they want to go do, the memories that they want to create. And so just really thinking about how do we kind of apply that mindset and focus on this digital transformation and make sure that we're thinking about this in a way that's not how do we get back to pre-COVID, but how do we make our current experience today even better?
I love that idea. And I'm glad to see that you're channeling your inner optimist again when you think about the future. If you were to channel your inner prognosticator, what changes have you seen for travel during the pandemic that you think will carry through into the future?
Yes, yes. I think one is, exploring locally. I think everyone this past year has discovered probably a new travel destination that they probably didn't know that they loved. And since they've gotten the opportunity to explore it, more people will try to appreciate their local environment. And so we're seeing an uptick in road trips naturally. There's also been a lot more last minute travel, so people, booking, 2 to 3 days in advance instead of 2 weeks in advance. And I think with people traveling more locally, they'll be more open to booking either a vacation that's 2 or 3 hours away, or even a staycation. And so I think people are starting to see hotels as not just places you go when you're going on the annual vacation, but it's also the place you can go when you just need a day away from home. And so I think that's really exciting. Um, I think there's going to be more choice around amenities. It's interesting when you lead a brand like Holiday Inn Express, you get to hear feedback from like all types of guests because you serve a diverse array of guests, and you'll hear some feedback that says, you know what, I'm glad housekeeping is not being offered daily because I hated it when they used to knock on my door every day, and I can clean up after myself. And then there are other people who, love the amenity and they're like, I actually want my housekeeping every day. I loved talking to them. They were always just so warm and friendly. I made me feel like I made me feel special when I was on the trip. And so what's great about that is I think we'll be offering our guests a lot more choice around some of these amenities instead of assuming what guests are looking for. I think we are going to see folks reinvesting in experiences and creating memories. I'm not sure if you've experienced this, Jeff, but I feel like a lot of folks are creating these new vacations or trips that are more like celebrate everything trips.
Yes.
We missed like grandma's birthday. We didn't get to celebrate this person's engagement. We didn't get to celebrate this person's promotion. Let's go on a trip and celebrate everything. And so I
Yes.
think as a society, we're investing in experiences more. And then, lastly, I think what's really interesting is, right now we're supposed to be talking about the future of travel, but the future of travel is very much connected to the future of work. If you think about pre-COVID, we used to talk about business and leisure travel, and then we may talk about leisure travel, which is when a business traveler would go to a conference or go on a work trip and then add on a vacation, right? Um, but now, really, what we're talking about is when people do travel for work, how do we make sure that they're balancing their time at home? And so it's more of a how often are folks actually going to be traveling for work? And when they're not traveling for work, how do we make the experience coming to a hotel? How do we bring that to life, even in a leisure circumstance? And then I'm also hearing a lot about people turning things that used to be pretty like typical parts of the year. So whether or not it was like a soccer tournament or it was a work trip that somebody usually would just go for a day and come back, they're turning them into vacations. So I heard a term the other day, turnications. And I was like, wow, like so soccer moms are turning going on these tournament trips and adding a day or two to vacations. So I think we're going to start seeing people kind of flip it on its head when we talk about the future of travel, also talk about what does the future of work look like. And if folks are going into the office less, but when they do, they're likely spending a week on a work trip rather than a couple days. They're likely also going to add extended vacations to that as well. If folks are working remotely in more locations, that means that there's more of an opportunity when they do all get together to spend more time at hotels. We may have actually more days at a time stayed at a hotel, but maybe less frequent travel in some industries. And then one thing that I think sometimes people think about when they talk about business travel, they'll often say, "Oh, well, business travel has been, cut significantly." There are still quite a few businesses that are traveling, and a lot of our essential workers that have been, so valuable, especially this past year, and doing a lot of really meaningful work. We've been serving a lot of those essential workers, a lot of these companies that provide us the products and services that are so needed. And so I think we'll continue to see growth in those areas, and we'll continue to see people evolve their travel habits as we evaluate what the future of work looks like.
Yeah, and I think the key theme there is really just the dramatic increase in the need for personalization at scale across the board. So
Mhm.
it ties into everything that you were mentioning. And
Absolutely.
on the flip side, is there anything that's been really surprising to you about the recovery so far?
Yeah, surprising. I think the thing that actually sticks out to me most is just the fact that people have been forced to go through a journey of self-discovery, and I'm always interested to better understand what the outcome of that is, and I think for everyone it looks a little bit different. But I think what's most surprising is probably those that used to be a road warrior, and I'm one of them. I for many years I loved being on the road. I loved the business trip, and I think for many of us, we realized how much we really loved being home, and really loved just spending time locally, spending time with family. And I think you're seeing a lot of folks really appreciate some of the outcomes that have come from the pandemic and just the discovery of your local environment. I think, for Holiday Inn Express, it's really interesting because our brand is such a well-loved brand. So every time I tell somebody about my job, there's always somebody who says like, "Oh my God, it's my favorite hotel because whenever I'm going on a road trip, I know exactly what I'm gonna get. I know that it's going to be a positive experience." And what's interesting is when we look at some of our data, we find that a lot of our Holiday Inn Express customers, they, earn their loyalty points with us, but they don't they're not actually earning them to go stay necessarily at another brand. They actually spend a lot of their loyalty points also with us, which actually tells you that there's just a genuine love for the brand, and travelers are getting their needs met for both like business and leisure purposes. And so I say that because I think what's been surprising about the recovery is we're seeing more and more of our guests, whether or not they tended to be loyal to Holiday Inn Express or another brand, choose Holiday Inn Express because we are in the right locations for the destinations that they're seeking to go to.
For sure. And I'm not surprised that you've been able to find yet another silver lining in there as well.
Mhm.
Um, we're we're running out of time. This is flying by. But before we move on to some of the audience Q&A and maybe talk about IHG for a minute, are there any other trends that are top of mind for you as it relates to the future of travel?
Yeah, I think I would just reiterate a couple real quickly that I think matter most. I think being globally minded, but very much focused on local. As I mentioned, we're very much focused on deeply understanding the customer needs and the customer journey across a lot of different regions, and also making sure that we're delivering our service given local regulations. And so, this like globally minded and locally focused has been really important. Um, I think the importance of creating a strong and cohesive digital experience and enabling limited contact or contactless solutions, that's something that you're continuing to see across our industry, and you'll see it at our brands. Leveraging data and insights for personalization. We talked a lot about this, but providing a lot of choice and flexibility. And that's not just for our guests, but it's also for our owners, making sure our owners know that we are partners with them and how they deliver the brand experience. And so I think those are the ones that are really top of mind as we start thinking about the future of travel.
For sure. I want to make sure we get to some of the questions from the audience as well. One came in here. It said, "What ways is your brand working to stand out in the eye of the consumer?"
Yeah, it's a great question. I think when you think about the brand hallmarks for Holiday Inn Express, you think about the sleep experience, where we have a customizable sleep experience. So making sure we have the highest quality bedding and making sure that the room is at our IHG Way of Clean standard. I think breakfast is often where we stand out most. So everyone often mentions the cinnamon rolls, which I will tell you have gotten better feedback than a lot of other branded cinnamon rolls. So next time you're at Holiday Inn Express, please check it out. But our breakfast is very much well known, and it's something that we see as a hallmark, and we are actively thinking about how we can continue to offer a new breakfast offering that meets the needs of our guests, but also takes into account, social distancing and all the requirements that we need to consider to keep our customers safe. And then lastly, I think when you enter a Holiday Inn Express, one thing that I think not a lot of people know about is our Formula Blue 2.0 design that is very much design forward, has a contemporary aesthetic, with lots of fresh color, but meets the needs of guests. And I think one thing as you enter into a new Holiday Inn Express, I think our owners see it because that's why we've grown to almost 3,000 hotels globally, but our guests see it too, that it's a value rich experience with a great design and all the essentials that you have to offer.
Great. I think we're almost out of time here, but I want to make sure that we touch on this amazing initiative that IHG recently launched called Journey to Tomorrow,
Of
which is a
course.
10-year action plan to help reshape the future of responsible travel. Can you please just briefly talk about that initiative?
Sure. So I also love Journey for Tomorrow. I think as you think about Journey Tomorrow, you really want to focus on the fact that it's really a way for us to make sure that we are delivering on being a company and a brand that represents true hospitality for good. And there are 5 areas in which we focus on that. One, it's our people. So how do we champion a diverse culture where everyone can thrive? Two, communities. How do we improve the lives of 30 million people in our communities around the world? And then three, around carbon and energy. How do we reduce our energy use and carbon emissions in line with the climate science? And waste is our fourth one. So how do we be a pioneer um, to transform and make sure that we are making sure that we are a minimal waste hospitality industry leader? And then water. How do we ensure we are conserving water and helping to secure water access in those areas of greatest risk? Lastly, I just want to make sure that I emphasize Journey Tomorrow is a 10-year action plan to shape the future of responsible travel. And one thing that we learned in serving our employees, but also serving our guests, is that everyone knows that this is incredibly important to be a leader in this area. So, 82% of our guests say they choose a hotel brand that operates responsibly. 60% of people say that the pandemic has made them more socially and environmentally conscious about their impact in the world when traveling.
Yeah.
And this whole idea of thinking globally, but making sure that you have the local community in mind. 86% of our guests say it's important for them to know the local community. And so, given all these factors, we're super excited about Journey Tomorrow and our investment in communities around the world.
That's amazing. I think Ariel might be here to give us the red light.
What a
Awesome.
great note to
Thank
end
you so
on.
much, Jeff.
Thank you guys so much for joining us today. What an awesome conversation. Stephanie, I loved what you said about choice in the consumer experience at your hotels. So resonated with me. I recently stayed at a hotel and was confused about whether or not the housekeeping was coming or not. And it's such a great initiative to have choice.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ariel. Great connecting,
Thank you very
Jeff.
much, Stephanie.
Thank you. With that, we will bring on our next two speakers for the day. We have Wendy Olson-Killian.